Okay, I think it's actually 6 o'clock, so I think we should start. Okay, very welcome to all of you that's here tonight when we will dive into gait analysis through a case study. And during this spring, we have hosted 2 other webinars, one with the Irish team vet, Marcus Whale, and the other one with one of our founder, Elin Hanlund. And if you haven't seen them, you can easily access them on our YouTube channel, which is called Sleip. And as usual, you are more than welcome to send in questions through the webinar, and those that are more general will be answered in text during the webinar, and those that are more related to today's subject will be answered in the Q&A after the webinar, or in the end of the webinar. And today's speaker is Sleip's Global Customer Success Manager, Aagje Hardeman. And not only is she a veterinarian and with a PhD and a certified chiropractor, she is also an expert in gait analysis. And as Global Customer Success Manager at Sleip, she helps and supports our new customer in learning how to use Sleip and how to interpret the data. And of course, if you're a current customer, if you have a tricky case, you can always reach out and get some support and discuss the case with Aagje. So I'm very proud to present Aagje Hardeman, today's speaker, and I'll just simply give the word to you, Aagje.
Yeah, thank you, Selma. I just want to share a screen. If you allow me to, that would be great.
Yeah, of course. Sorry. Yeah, okay, you're good.
Let's see if the presentation wants to work with us. One. There we go. Does that look good to you?
Very good.
Okay, great. Yeah, like Selma said, I have a few topics around the clinical application of gait analysis that I want to show you. And I just use one case over multiple days where we go through with each other and have a look into detail of what's going on. And yeah, that hopefully helps you in the data collection and data interpretation of your own cases. So what would I like you to learn during this webinar is, first of all, have a check on your data quality. What can you do to check the data quality of the recordings that you did? You get a first introduction on how to distinguish single limb blame, multi-limb blame, and compensatory asymmetries. And the same is true for interpretation of data on the lunge. And be aware, I mean, we only have an hour, and this is a very complex topic, so it will only be a first introduction, and understand the difference in stride-to-stride variation between a sound and a limb horse. And to walk through that, I want to show you the first trot-up of this horse, which is a 4-year-old warm blood. It's a dressage horse, and it was presented to the clinic as it showed a severe lameness at home. And here you can see the video of the first trot-up on the first day. And yeah, we are a very big group, so unfortunately we can't have a lot of interaction, but yeah, make your own opinion, have a look at the horse, and tell me what you think. So as you can see, the horse is being trotted up twice, so 2 times up and 2 times down. And that's actually quite important if you want to collect enough strides. For those of you who already used the Sleip application, you probably know this video on how to record on a straight line. But I'm also the one who has to evaluate the reviews that we get in. So when the videos did not go completely as they should have gone, and I still see quite some mistakes going on, people not collecting enough strides. Yeah, I think it's very helpful if you use the how to record instructional videos. And here you see the one that's for the straight line. Yeah, so I hope you have a feeling about this horse. I will walk you through the plots one by one, because there will be quite a lot of people that are not used to the Sleip graphs for now. But what we do first, and I think that's a very important step, is that you first look at your data quality. And Sleip actually provides you with 2 parameters to assess that. That's the number of strides and the stride variation. And you see that here within the red circle. So as you can see, there are 34 strides collected for the forelimbs and 23 strides collected for the hind limbs. And that is something to keep in mind. Why is there such a difference? Well, we can only track the hind limbs when the horse is trotting away from you. And that is one of the main reasons that you should always collect 2 laps of trotting on a straight line. And of course, you aim for a low variation because you want the horse to be as steady as possible. But yeah, how do you actually do that? There are a lot of factors that play a role if you want to collect high quality data. Like I said, the number of strides is a very important one. And as a general rule of thumb, we can say that between 15 to 20 strides is a good amount of strides to get reliable data. But of course, that's a general rule of thumb, because this amount of strides depends on the between stride variation and the lameness grade. And that's maybe one of the first take-home messages I want to give to you, because when you look at a very lame horse, the between stride variation tends to go down. Whereas when you look at the sound horse, think about a horse that is presented to you for a pre-purchase exam, for example, and they tend to have a very high stride-to-stride variation. And I think that's kind of logical. I mean, a sound horse feels very free to load and unload the limbs in different ways, whereas a horse that's severely lame found a way of walking or trotting that releases the pain as much as possible. So they have a type of biomechanical way of moving with the lowest amount of load on the painful structure. So these horses tend to have a very low between stride variation, and therefore you usually also need less strides. So that's one of the things you need to take care of. The other one is a suitable location. You don't want to be disturbed. You don't want the horse to be disturbed. It should be a proper trot-up. Surface plays a role as well. You will see that surface already plays a role in how the data looks like, so soft versus hard surface. But also, is it a flat surface, or is there an angle from the left to the right or from the beginning to the end? That plays quite a big role in how your data looks like. So be careful that you have the same surface and that it's a flat surface during the entire trot-up. You want the horse to have a constant or a stable lameness. A horse that is just pulled out of the truck and you start trotting immediately might look a bit different as where you give it a warm-up period of 10 or 15 minutes. Keep that in mind. The handler plays a very important role as well. Preferably, you would like to have the same handler throughout the entire examination, because maybe if you do FEI events, that the one who's trotting up the horse has a huge influence on what the horse looks like and how it is presented. Of course, this is clinically not always possible, but keep that in mind and try to keep the same handler as much as you can. Horse behavior, if they are very anxious, it might influence the data, because the horse is maybe moving its head a lot or jumping around, and their sedation might be useful. Speed, try to keep a constant speed throughout the entire measurement. And if we're talking about lunging, circle size plays an important role as well. And we will see that later on in the webinar as well. Shoeing or hooves, so missing shoes. can have an influence, and very asymmetric hooves as well. Light conditions, and that's something specifically for Sleip, of course. Try not to record against the very strong sunlight, and generally take care of enough light and contrast. And this is maybe something that you don't think about when you do your recordings, because we are actually looking, for the ones who do it already, looking at top line motion, but we do need the limbs of the horse to be able to perform the stride split. And in other words, to say whether it's a left or a right step. So take care that the entire horse is in the picture and that we can also see the hooves. Yeah, I saw last week a lot of recordings coming in from horses in a very dusty environment, and then you cannot really see the lower limb anymore, and that makes it very difficult to use these recordings, because we're not sure whether it's a left or a right foot. Make sure you make a stable recording, so you can hold it in your hand, of course, the phone, but you need to make sure that you keep it very still. I would always recommend you to use a tripod, because that's the most stable hand you can have, and you can focus on the horse instead of on your phone. For all these things, we try to make a proper recording, and for all the first factors, we try to lower the standard deviation or the stride-to-stride variation as much as we can. Bear in mind that we are not able to select the representative strides. And that is something that you, as an experienced vet, you are trained to that. If you see a horse trotting up and down and you see a few strides and you think, yeah, those are the ones that I need to keep in mind. Yeah, that part of pattern recognition in your brain is super well developed, and our systems cannot do that. Yeah, we calculate all strides, or all calculated strides are included in the mean. So that is something to bear in mind when you collect your data. Yeah, let's go back to our horse. Remember the trot-up that we saw? I just want to go with you through all the plots. We already talked about the analysis certainty. Then you get the asymmetry type. So it is a graphical illustration of all symmetries that are detected. We get the stride split, or the individual strides, and this is where parameters are quantified. So what we'll actually do is calculating the difference between the left and the right step at trot. And here you see the movement of the head in the vertical amplitude, and for blue, the movement of the hind in the vertical amplitude. So if we follow one of these curves, it's landing on the left front, it's pushing off with the left front, it's landing on the right front and pushing off with the right front. And you calculate the differences in the maxima and the difference in the minima. And the same is actually true for the pelvis. So this is the movement of the tuba sacrale. You see the landing on the left hind, pushing off with the left hind, landing on the right hind, pushing off with the right hind. And there again, calculation of the difference in the minimum, which is here 0.3 with a standard deviation of 0.1, and the difference in the maxima, which is here 0.2 with a standard deviation of 0.1. So that's for the stride split. Then for the next step, you come to the gait analysis step, and you see these clock plots. And they are very useful if you want to assess any patterns, or if you want to assess the stride-to-stride variation. Of course, you have the standard deviation in the stride split as well, but it gives you a really nice visualization. Of course, you can't quantify it in here, but you can really recognize what's going on pattern-wise. So if we look at this horse, you see that all limbs are green except for the right hind, and the right hind ear is gray with an arrow down. In other words, there is something going on in the impact phase, and you can quantify that here in the stride split. You see that in the impact phase, we have an asymmetry of 0.3 pointing towards the right. And when you go to the clock plots, you can actually see how that is going stride by stride, because each line is one stride. And you can see in here actually that you have quite a diversity in the front, though everything is pointing a bit downwards. And that is something that I want you to keep in mind when we continue with this case. And although it's very mild in the hind, you see that everything is pointing towards the right, either to the impact quadrant on the right hind or to the push-off quadrant in the right hind. But if you think about this horse, it was presented for severe lameness well, I don't know what you thought about it, but when I saw it trotting up, I thought, okay, but maybe time fixed a lot of issues in here. And you might send it home and just give it a bit more of a break and look at it again. But this was the same horse on the second day. Yeah, and have a look what you think. And I hope that you already saw when the horse is trotting away from you that the right hind got way more asymmetric. I hope your internet connection is good enough to see the video properly, and else you can always look it back afterwards. And you probably see some asymmetry in the front as well in here. And again, always make 2 laps to make sure you collect enough strides, especially for the hind limbs. Here, if you focus on the tuba sacrale, you probably see that it's very asymmetric in the upward downward movement. Actually in both, but mainly in the difference in the lowest points. So if you know a bit of research behind biomechanics, you probably know that the agreement between vets is very low, but let's assume we all agree on this one, that we see something going on in the right hind, and probably you also saw something in the right front. Well, this is the horse, what it looked like data-wise. And I think this is another take-home that I would like to give to you, because this was likely not a stable lameness. You see when the horse stayed in the clinic overnight and you trot it up again, you see that it actually got way more asymmetric than it was on the first day. And please bear in mind that that effect can happen, and that adrenaline maybe has a bigger influence than we all think. Yeah, going to the data, like we saw before, the forelimbs look green in the horse picture. The right hind actually got yellow in here, still with an arrow down. Data quality wise, we're still doing fine. Looking at the asymmetries in the graphical illustration, you see that you actually have both a push-off and an impact component going on the right hind. So that is something that I always tell vets. This horse picture is very nice, and it's a first view to look at, and it's very nice to explain to owners what's going on, but it's not a complete picture. As you can see in here, it only tells you what's the biggest component in both asymmetries, whereas in the asymmetry types and for sure in the individual stride split, you can see that there's both a push-off and an impact component going on, and it actually got much bigger compared to the first day. So I think we can conclude that this horse got way more asymmetric on the right hind, and most strides are clustered now in the right hind impact quadrant. But what happened in the front? Of course, you see 2 green legs, and you might think, oh, everything is nice and fine in the front. But if you look in the plot, you can see that the strides are not really all over the place. And that is something that I want you to remember. But also what happened when we compare it to the day before. Because when I put those 2 plots next to each other, you actually see that this went from a right front, left front mix to more right front impact. And the mean value is still green. So that is something, although the mean value might look the same in the horse view, we have a complete different pattern in here. And yeah, what's the reason for that? Well, and that is the next step I want to take you to, because their horses are very good in showing compensatory asymmetries. And this horse changed in the hind. As you can see, from a mild to a quite severe asymmetry on the right hind. And that is in here the explanation of what is going on in the front. Maybe if you visit our website on a regular basis, you might have seen this blog that was written about compensatory patterns. If you didn't, then please have a read, because it's a very valuable information for your clinical data interpretation. And this figure actually tells you the basic rules of compensatory asymmetry. So if we are talking about a primary hind limb lameness, and that is depicted here on the right side with the red dot on the left hind, you usually see an ipsilateral forelimb asymmetry. And if we're talking about a primary forelimb lameness, you usually see a contralateral pelvic push-off and an ipsilateral pelvic impact asymmetry. Please bear in mind, this is a first introduction. It's a very short crash course. There are way more patterns than this, and there's a lot of variation between horses. But there's actually quite some nice research going on about compensatory patterns in horses. And I really like this study from the group from Kevin Keegan, where they did a clinical assessment of a large amount of horses, and they actually looked at these patterns and where the initial lameness came from. So if you have a bit of time, have a read. And this is from the groups from Europe, where we had a look at the role of the withers, and where we figured out that that plays an important role as well. So that is something that we are currently working on in the Sleip application as well, to give you the vertical amplitude of the withers. Yeah, so back to our case. Now you probably know, when you keep all the information in mind, that this right hind asymmetry is actually the cause, or is very likely the cause of a stronger right front asymmetry. And if you look at this study from Dr. Reed, you see that this is what they call pattern 1, which causes ipsilateral hind limb push-off and impact. And those are mainly hind limb lame horses. Yeah, invest in that knowledge and have a read about the biomechanics behind these patterns. This is the same horse a bit later on the soft surface. And yeah, let's go through the data. Usually I would prefer you to do that yourself, but that's a bit difficult in this session. So I'll just guide you through it. You still see the yellow limb on the right hind, but you also see now a gray limb on the right front. And for the ones of you who are picky on the data quality, very good. You see that the bar in the hind legs actually turned orange. With these two parameters underneath, a number of strides of 10 and a high stride-to-stride variation. So always look at that part when you assess your data. So is that good enough? Well, yeah, as we saw, general rule of thumb, no, that's actually too low. When we look at the pattern of this horse, all strides are very consistent. So it's not ideal, but I would feel comfortable in having a look at the data when it looks this consistent. Yeah, so generally the horse looks more or less the same. And now you maybe think, yeah, what did it look like again on the hard straight line? Well, there we have the comparison view in the application, and you can recognize that by this icon. And there you can just select two measurements and put them next to each other. So in here you see a screenshot of the trot-up. You see the date and the time, and these arrows means it is a straight line measurement. And here the same for the soft surface. And there you can actually put two measurements next to each other, both in the asymmetry types and in the clock plots. And you can actually see what happens. And yeah, it turned from green to gray, but it is a big is it a big difference? No, not really. Yeah, if you look at the values, you see it go from 0.2 to 0.3, and that is just the cutoff value to change the color. So again, bear in mind, do not only look at the colors, but look at the values and look at the patterns. I just wanted to show you the video on the soft straight line, so you know what the horse looked like. That soft straight line that belongs to the data that we just looked at together. And I would like you to make a plan of what we are going to do after this. hopefully I hear a lot of people saying, yeah, I only saw the straight line now. I want to see the lunge as well. And yeah, I think that's very important. Of course, the straight line gives you a lot of information already, and data interpretation on the straight line is literally much more straightforward, but the lunge plays an important role as well. And I want to show you where it can help you. Because this is the data from this horse on the lunge, on the soft surface. And I just want to talk you through the plots again, so you know what we are actually looking at. First of all, of course, again, data quality. We have a lot of strides, though we do see a high variation on the right lunge for the head. And I will show you the videos afterwards, of course. But bear that in mind, that you will understand probably why that is. Is that ideal? No, but you see that the green, that the bar is still indicated as green. So in this case, there are so many strides collected that even a bit more variation between strides doesn't influence the data that much. Is that the best you can do? No, of course, if you want to have a perfect recording, then you make a new recording and you take care that you have a low variation in the head movement. Is that clinically, practically always doable? No. And there are a lot of horses where you don't come to that point, and then you need to, come to a solution that is practically possible, which is in this case just collecting more strides to come to reliable data output. Yeah, and then I very often get this question from Sleip users. Yeah, where is that horse with the colored legs on the lunge? Because it's so easy to look at, and now it is gone at the lunge. Can we have it on the lunge data as well? And there's a good reason for it that we don't have it on the lunge, because when we are looking at the lunge, we do not only have asymmetries due to, for example, lameness, but we also have circle-induced asymmetries. And some of you might have heard of that and some of you not. So I just want to show you, what that is. So circle-induced asymmetries. It's actually something that that happens when you try to move on a circle. And think of it yourself when you're biking on a small circle, for example, with a high speed. You need to lean into the circle, else you would just fly out of the circle. There's nothing different in a horse trotting on a circle. The same happens. And that is something that causes asymmetries by itself. That has nothing to do with lameness. What is true about these circle-induced asymmetries? So first of all, you want to be able to mirror them between the left and the right lunge. So as much asymmetry to the left on the left side as to the right on the right side. These asymmetries are influenced by speed and by circle diameter, and they follow certain patterns. And these patterns depend on horse and they depend on surface. So again, quite a lot of biomechanical knowledge that you need to be able to interpret your data properly. These asymmetries, like I said, we just saw something on the circle-induced asymmetries, or what's also due here, how we say it's due to body lean or torso tilt. But on the circle, you can also see asymmetries, of course, due to lameness, or asymmetries due to compensatory asymmetries, or asymmetries due to the rider. We know from research that the rider has a big influence there, and that there's a huge difference between posting versus sitting trot. And then we also can have asymmetries that are not related to pain. So a lot of stuff is going on, and especially on the circle. And these asymmetries can cancel each other out, but they can also be added up. And that's why it's very important that you have a lot of knowledge about all the different patterns, but also about what's happening on the lunge, what the rider is doing, and what could cause asymmetries else than pain or weight-bearing lameness. Yeah, what can you expect a horse to do on the lunge? When we're looking at soft surface, it's usually an inside impact asymmetry, both in the forelimbs and in the hind limbs. And in the hind limbs, you also see an outside push-up asymmetry. On hard surface, it's this inside impact asymmetry, and there the outside in the hind limb is a bit different. Sometimes they end up in the middle, sometimes they end up as an impact asymmetry as well. What is something that you definitely don't expect them to do? For forelimbs, an outside impact asymmetry. And this differs a bit between publications, but there are a few that say an inside push-off asymmetry is also something that we don't expect them to do. And for the hind limbs, an outside impact asymmetry. So if you keep this in mind and then look back at the data from our case, when we said what we expect and what we don't expect, you see what this horse is doing. When we're looking at the left circle, this horse actually shows a right front impact asymmetry. Whereas when we're looking at the right circle, this horse actually shows a left front impact asymmetry. And these are pretty symmetrical. Like we said before, you want to be able to mirror the asymmetries. And that is kind of true in here. And that is also why when you look at the combined analysis, the forelimbs ends up with nothing, which is what you actually want. But if you have the biomechanical knowledge of which patterns are normal and which are not, then you would, you would recognize that this horse has a pattern that we don't expect them to do, an outside impact. And here also an inside push-off asymmetry in the front. So keep that in mind. And then when we look at the hind limbs, this is what we already saw on the straight line as well. There we saw a right hind asymmetry, and it actually is visible in here on the circles as well. But these patterns in the front are very important to keep in mind. Don't only look at the combined analysis, but look at the directional analysis as well. And you can quantify it again, of course, in here when you look at the stride split. And I want to show you the videos of this one to see if you agree that this is an unexpected pattern that we actually talk about the bilateral forelimb lameness. And keep in mind what we saw before in the analysis certainty, that we had quite a lot of variation in the forelimbs. And in here you can probably see why that happened. And would you be able to control that? Well, in this situation, I don't think so. I think the decision of the clinician in here to say, okay, I just collect more strides was a good one. I hope that you agree with me in here that we actually see a right forelameness in this horse on the left circle. And now we go to the other circle, and here I actually have the video for you on how to record when lunging. Please have a look also when you already use the application, and make sure, like you see in this presentation, that you collect one direction per recording to be able to compare them with each other. And now you know why you cannot record the left and the right lunge in one recording. So hopefully you agree in here as well, that you see that this horse is left front lame on the right circle. So where we actually started on day one with this horse with a very small asymmetry on the right hind, we now end up with the horse that's actually lame on 3 limbs. So yeah, next question is, where do we start blocking? And that depends on a lot of information, of course, maybe on the history of the horse, the situation, how cooperative is it? How was the anamnesis, and so on. In this situation, the clinician said, I want to start on the right hind, which actually makes sense, I think, when you look at the straight line measurements. So I want you to have a look at this video, because this is the horse after blocking the right hind. It's a low 4 point. So what would you say concerning the right hind? That's question 1. And please do not only focus on the right hind limb. I would like you to look at the entire horse. Is there anything else that catches your eye? And based on the video, what would be your next step? Well, I'm sure you have your opinion ready there. So let's have a look at the data. And for this one, let's go back. I just want you to show you where you put the blocks in. And therefore you use this icon of the syringe and you put it in the original video tab. So that's this one. And then it pops up actually in your summary screen as well. So when here you see diagnostic analgesia, you selected one, which is the right hind low 4 point in this case. I'm just wondering where my pop-up is. No, that's gone. Okay, we'll leave it. But that's easy findable. And we have a very nice drop-down menu now in the original tab where you can, first of all, you choose limb, and then second of all, you choose whether it's a regional or an intra-articular block. So it's, a shorter list and very fast process to put the block in. And please do this so you have your documentation ready when you need it. Yeah, so have a look at this horse. What do we see? Well, the right hind is now gray, still with an arrow down, and the left front is now gray with an arrow up. You see we have two asymmetries in the push-off and in the impact phase on the left front and one on the right hind. But hopefully you remember how it was before. And if not, you can use the comparison view. It's quite nice. Again, before and after block. You see we went from 0.9 to 0.3 and from 0.3 to 0. And in the four limbs, you see that it actually flipped over from a right front 0.3 to a left front 0.2. So again, educate yourself in the patterns that you expect or that you don't expect on the straight line and on the lunge. Because this one, you see what's happening actually in the front. You have this right hind asymmetry with a mild right front asymmetry. Now you block out most of the right hind asymmetry, and you see that the front actually flips to the left. And although it's mild, you see that the strides are not all over the place. And remember what we said with sound horses feel free to load and unload in all directions. And in here you can actually see that it is all clustered to the left. So that might make you suspicious of something going on. And then you might think, yeah, what are these percentages? What is going on in here? What is it? Well, that's the next sidetrack that I would like to do and show you around in here. What is happening and what we actually calculate. So what we do is we calculate a percentage improvement towards zero asymmetry on the internal Sleip scale. And we do that for the min diff or the impact and the max diff or the push-off. If you have a case where you are switching limbs, for example, you have a max, for example, you go here from the, let's see which one it is in here, from the right hind to the left hind, you see that we have a maximum decrease of 100%. If you have an increase of asymmetry, there's a maximum of 200%. So for example, in here, you go from 0.1 to 0.4, it gives you a maximum of 200%. So you don't end up with percentages of 4,000 or whatever. Yeah, let's go back to our case. This is the horse before and after the low 4 point. The question is, would you continue blocking? Well, that's of course a question that's not only dependent on the data. I mean, and here you see that you blocked a lot of the asymmetry out. But the question is also, what do you expect? Do you expect to be able to block it to zero? And that depends on the horse, on the pathology that you probably expect, on whether it's an acute or a chronic lameness. So all those factors play a role. And there's not enough time to go through them one by one. But in here, I would say, look at the anamnesis, use the video, and assess the lunge again to see what's actually happening. And this is what the horse looked like on the lunge. So let's have a look. Data still quality-wise looks fine. What do we see in the combined analysis? We see a left front component and a right hind component. Look into detail in the directions. You actually see here something that pops up. or that catches your eye, hopefully, that something is going on now on the left front. It's a huge asymmetry component in the impact phase. And if you want to quantify it, you can see in here, this is again the right lunge, that you have an asymmetry now of 1.3 on the left front, on the right lunge. And again, that is something that we don't expect pattern-wise. If you want, this is something I really like to compare the lunging directions one by one as well. You can select those and use the same comparison view. So the left and the left lunge before and after block, and the right with the right lunge before and after block. Yeah, this is what the horse looks like on the lunge. And please don't look at 2 videos simultaneously, because your brain is not made for that, but look at them one by one. But for time reasons, I would like to show them to you simultaneously. And I hope that you agree with me in here that we should probably start blocking the left front as well. So this is the same horse starting to block the left front in the lower foot. And yeah, have a look at the straight line. Tell me what you think. And I hope that you say now to yourself or your neighbor, if you listen with multiple people, it's not a lot, but I still see something on the left front. And this is what the horse actually looks like after blocking the lower foot on the left front. So yeah, you see the gray leg on the left front, you see an impact component on the left front, and you still see that the most of the strides are clustered in the left front impact quadrant. And you actually see that the asymmetry in the hind decreased even further. And there are quite a few studies that show that the waiting time is probably more, or we should wait longer after blocking than what we do in the current clinical situation. But that's another sidetrack. Yeah, so this is the comparison view again. Before and after block, and I put both blocks in here. So baseline to the low 4 point of the right hind, and then low 4 point right hind towards the lower foot of the left front. So what you see is that the push off decreased a bit and the impact increased a bit. But yeah, no major changes, so difficult to say. Also pattern wise, maybe difficult to say what's going on, if there's something going on. So again, have a look at the lunge. And you still see that this huge asymmetry component of the left front in the impact phase on the right circle is there. Again, you can put the lunges next to each other to assess that, but you can see in here that there's, yeah, not so much difference on the lunge either. So no clear improvement of the left front, neither in numbers nor in change of pattern. So based on the data, I would say let's continue blocking. And yeah, you can have a look at the videos if you agree with that. And I think this way of learning orthopedics generally, I mean, we do it now retrospectively, but you can do the same, of course, during the day, and you can educate both the younger interns or younger veterinarians in how to assess lameness, but also as an experienced vet, it's super useful to actually understand what we are looking at. Like I said, our brain is well trained in pattern recognition, but quite often we actually don't really know what we are looking at and what we are assessing. So therefore, the application with the data in the video can help a lot as well. Yeah, so I hope that you agree that there's nothing or not so much changed in here. And for the sake of time, I skipped a block. I want to show you the next one, which is the infiltration of the proximal suspensory. And here you see what it looks like. So although small, you actually see already on the straight line that the left front asymmetry swap to a mild right front asymmetry, and that the patterns look different, right? Remember what we had before. We can evaluate a bit closer again with the comparison view. So you can actually see that this very mild asymmetry here on the left front swapped over to the right front, and that it's not only the mean value, you see that all these strides now point towards the right. So it's very mild, but something clearly happened in here. And yeah, let's have a look at the video to see what you think, if you are convinced about the change or not. And hopefully you're already telling yourself, yeah, I want to see the lunge as well. I want to see what's going on the lunge. So here you have the data on the lunge. And yeah, I hope that you're now so well trained in looking at these plots that you see immediately that this left front asymmetry swapped to the right front in actually quite a severe asymmetry on both circles. So again, we swapped limbs there, where we started with the right hind towards the left front, and now we're actually on the right front. And please have a look at the videos if you agree with yourself on the data. And hopefully you do, else let me know. So for the sake of time, we're not going to go through all the blocks of the other limb as well. But the right front ended up here the same as the left front with a positive block on the proximal suspensory. So let's have a look at the horse on the next day, because we blocked the low 4 point in the hind, but we want to localize it a bit better. So this is actually the baseline when we started trotting on day 3. Maybe you remember what it looked like on day 1 and 2, maybe you don't. So I just put it next to each other to see what's actually happening with this horse over time. And I think that you can recognize that lameness can differ quite a lot from day to day. And that's why it's so important to stabilize it properly. That's one. And second of all, to make a new baseline every day. So don't use your baseline from yesterday, or even worse, the day before yesterday, when you want to start blocking the horse. This effect is actually also true for sound horses. They also show a bit of variation between days and within a day, but it's way less than what we see in most lame horses. But the reason that, this fact that they show not that much variation when you compare a horse to itself is actually the reason that we can monitor horses so well over time with gait analysis. So we can actually detect very small asymmetries in an early stage in that way, because we know what they look like last week or the week before. Whereas when you have to compare them to group mean values, it's much more difficult to say if something changed, yes or no. And for that option, we actually have the sharing functionality within the application. So therefore you can use this icon. Maybe you already used it, or maybe you saw it, or if you never used the Sleip app, then this is new to you. But this is the icon that you use to invite an owner or a trainer to record the horse at another location, just because they are maybe not able to come to you every week, or they travel the horse for competition, or there's another reason that you can't assess the horse live. Well, then they can record the horse themselves, and they can actually send you the data. So they will get a very short summary of what's going on, but all the data, is how we looked at it now, will be sent to the veterinarian's account. And I think that's a very useful tool to help assess horses as in longitudinal monitoring. So what did this horse do? Here you see the new baseline on the third day this time, because we want to be a bit more precise on what's going on the right hind before we go to imaging. And I hope you agree with the data and with your own eye that it's still quite lame on the right hind. So what was done is blocking the fetlock joint on the right hind. As you remember, day one was a low 4 point. And what you see in here is, again, a gray leg now on the right hind and a gray leg on the left front, with asymmetries here, although mild, but a bit on the left front and a bit on the right hind. Let's have a look at the comparison view so we know what happened actually. And you see that you have quite a decrease of asymmetry, around 60 and 80% in the right hind. And you can also assess that here in the clock plots. And you can see that the strides get a bit more variation as well, but that the amplitude, so the length of the line, is much shorter after your block. And you also see a bit of the same effect as what we had last day, that the asymmetry on the left front tends to increase a bit in here. Yeah, so that's what the horse looked like after block. Have a look if you agree with the data, what we just went through. And hopefully you do agree with yourself, or with me in this case, because no one's speaking against me. It's kind of easy. Yeah, I think it's good to realize that this horse, where we actually started with one trot up, and maybe you thought as well, oh, but if this is a severe lameness, then time did its job. Let's give it a bit more time and it's probably done. Where we now end up with a multi-limb lame horse and a positive intra-articular block on the right hind fetlock and a bilateral proximal suspensory issue. Yeah, so I hope that this gave you a bit of insight of how you can use the application during lameness assessments. And yeah, like I already said during the presentation, a few things that I would like you to take home. Check your data quality before you go to data interpretation. I usually compare that with making an MRI. If the imaging is quality-wise not good enough, then you cannot do a proper interpretation and you might make mistakes. And that's exactly the same for gait analysis. So be very picky on your data collection. And invest in your biomechanical knowledge. And this might have give you a little bit of insight of what is going on, but biomechanics in horses is something that is researched for decades, and where a few universities played a major role, if I can say it like that, like Paris and Utrecht, Uppsala and Zurich. Have a read and see what is all been researched already, and educate yourself, and be aware that this is quite a time investment. For Sleip, practically, it's not so complicated. It's actually super easy. You just need a good quality iPhone, and we see a lot of vets using Sleip as an excuse to just buy a new iPhone. So that's an easy one. You need an internet connection. And like I said, I would recommend you to use a tripod, but you can hold the phone in your hand as well if you don't have one, or for practical reasons, you don't want to use one. So yeah, that's mainly it. I want to say thank you to Tierklinik Lüsche, because they provided me with this case to show to you and to give you a bit of insight of what's all going on around gait analysis. Again, it's a very short introduction, but hopefully useful for you in your daily routine. If it's okay, I want to close this presentation, because then I can see if there are any questions popping up.
Yeah, let's see if someone has sent in. No questions so far. Maybe you were super clear, Aagje.
I don't know. I think it's very complex. I always have more questions after when I start.
Yeah. Oh no, here's one. Do you see it, Aagje?
No, let me. Yeah, now I can see it.
Good.
Is there going to be an Android compatible version? Yeah, this is a question that's happening a lot. Is that the one you mean, Selma?
Yeah, now there's another one as well, but
maybe in the future, but for now, definitely not. It's all iOS. Yeah, if you want to use it, then go for iPhone. And the second one, have you noticed a problem if phone calls come through during a video upload? Should we use airplane mode? That's a very good question. And I use it a lot, but I don't think I ever had issues with that. I think I just ignored the phone calls. But to be 100% sure, I need to try this out. It's a very good question. Maybe you can drop us your email, and then I can figure it out. When will a farrier version be available? Yeah, that's on the wish list as well. I know we have a lot of ideas and cool stuff to go and to do in the future. But for sure, something that would help farriers in doing their job in a better way is on the wish list as well. When is it available? I don't dare to answer you. But yeah, it's on the list, so we don't forget the farriers.
okay, good. Any more questions?
I think that's it, right?
I think that's it. Okay, then I think we call it a night. And thank you so much for listening, and thank you, Aagje, for doing this webinar.
If there are more questions popping up, then I would say people can also drop us an email.
Yes, of course. And if you are curious more curious at Sleip, you can always go to our website and book a demonstration of the app. Or reach out to us if you have any questions or you're curious. So yeah, I think that's it. Have a good night, everyone. Bye.